Welcome to Dialogue, a true crime conversation. I'm your host, Rebecca Sebastian, and I'm thrilled to be back with another episode in our cult-adjacent series, which is just so much fun. Who knew talking about cults could be this much fun? I mean, I knew. I'm just glad now the discovery has extended to my listeners. Vulture picked up my interview with Amanda Montell from last week. If you hear a low-key, by the way, if you hear a low-key growl, that is not my stomach. It is my dog, Sherlock. I can only record this right now in this space with him, so I apologize if you hear that in the background. But truly, I am having a blast, and today's episode is another really fun one, really educational, but it's also kind of bananas, and I'm excited for you to hear it. I sat down with Nick Emel of the Tenish podcast. The Tenish podcast is a comedy edutainment, right? Like infotainment, it's education-tainment podcast discussing and breaking down a top 10-ish list every week in real time. And he does this with his co-host, Brandon Kaufman, who super sadly couldn't join us for the interview. But Nick and I, we had a lot to cover. So let's get right into it. This is the top 10 modern cults you probably definitely haven't heard of. So definitely let me know if any of these were on your radar. Of course, I threw NXIVM in there because it had to. It's a modern cult, and I'm sure you've heard of NXIVM. But the other 9 are pretty obscure. So Nick brought 5, I brought 5, and we traded stories. And wow, I cannot wait to hear what you think. Nick, thank you so much for killing the small talk. Please check out his show, Tenish Podcast. It will be in the show notes, as will our source material. This was a very research-heavy episode, and we'll link to those articles in the show notes. Enjoy. I am very excited to welcome Nick Emel to the Dialogue Podcast. Hi, Nick. Welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me, Rebecca.
Oh, I'm so excited. I know you're just one half of the Tenish podcast. I won't say personally which half I think you are, but I'm sorry Brandon couldn't make it.
I know Brandon had been planning on making it up until today. He's just feeling under the weather, so I'm doing it alone.
Yeah, we wish him well, and hopefully by the time this is out, he is totally on the up and up, but I'm thrilled you're here. And you know, before we get into the fun thing we have planned, why don't you just talk a little bit about the Tenish podcast, which is such a great concept, and why you decided to develop a podcast specifically that way?
Yeah. Well, thanks again for having me on. We were just talking before we hit record that this is quite a bit different than your typical format. So I appreciate you trying something new out here with me. So I'm one half of the Tenish podcast. My sidekick host, Brandon, couldn't be here, but together we cover top 10 lists, top 10-ish lists every week. We've been going for just over 3 years now, about 150 episodes so far.
Wow.
Yeah. So we cover top 10 lists that are usually quantitative. So database lists where one of us will bring a list to an episode. The other doesn't know what that list is. They have no heads up, and they try to guess on the spot items 1 through 10 on the list. I mentioned it's quantitative, so that would be like, instead of our favorite movies, it's the highest grossing movies as one example.
Okay.
So we start the show, and one of us will introduce the topic at the top.
Okay.
And 9 times out of 10, I didn't know what the list was until he told me live in real time, same time the listener's finding out. But yeah, that's kind of the fun of it, is I don't have time to research or prep ahead of time. It allows the listener to kind of feel like they're sitting there guessing right along with us.
And I can imagine by now, 3 years in, you have some listeners. Are they super competitive? Do they tell you when they got 10 out of 10?
Most of the time people are like, I can't believe you didn't guess this. Or I was yelling at my phone to guess this. Yeah, I think listeners do like to play along. And we also bring some trivia, some factoids about those things.
Yeah.
Since a different one of us brings the list each week. And by the way, we don't just bring the list. There's quite a bit of research that we do. It keeps it fresh. And I know, obviously, this is a true crime podcast. And I mentioned movies, you mentioned worst states, but we cover every genre you can think of, including true crime. We've done the top 10 most prolific serial killers in the US and a different list for the UK. And that's based on their estimated number of victims. We've done a bunch of true crime. So
that's how I found you, was your crossover with the doctors, Scott and Shiloh from LA Not So Confidential.
Yes, I love the doctors. LA Not So Confidential have been great friends of the pod since almost the beginning. Yeah, we were on one of their Get Vocal live streams last year. I think we did the smartest serial killers. Brandon and I guessed their list. Yeah. And then actually, we're talking cults today, you and I. Dr. Shiloh provided me a list of the top 10 cults ranked by number of victims.
Death tolls.
Death toll.
Yeah. And we're going to get into a little bit of that tonight. I don't know what your list looks like. Mine has some alarming numbers. Yeah. So it was fun to talk with you about how we wanted to structure tonight, right? So what we've decided, season 3 just started here, and we started with MLMs, which is cult adjacent. I would be so brave to say. And I'm kind of always willing to talk about cults here, so I sneak them in often. But I liked the idea of doing a top 10 cult list. And your idea was, modern, lesser known cults. So we're hoping to bring our listeners today, we're hoping to surprise each other. But in all, we're going to have 10 cults you probably haven't heard of, I'm guessing, with maybe a couple of exceptions.
You and I each brought 5.
Right.
And of my 5, I'd only heard of 1. And I consider myself very well versed in true crime. Obviously, you do too, even more so than me. And so for me maybe you'll surprise me, but I don't think you've heard of these either. So these are some very obscure cults. Yeah.
Well, that's the interesting thing about cults is it's broad. I mean, I'm sure you came across the words new religious movement a lot, because that's another way to describe some of these fringier small ones. And then we had this 2-decade time span we're working within. So the cults that you and I are going to dissect and talk about today are we decided what modern was to us. So I'm doing 1980 to 2000, and you're going to take it or 99, I guess, for me. And then from 2000 to 2020, you will have cults in that window. And I already broke my own rules, and you'll hear in a minute. It was hard to find things between 1980 and 1999 being established, but are you ready to get into it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's do it. Do you want to go first?
I'll go first.
Yeah.
Although it feels nice to let my guests go first, actually.
Okay.
Let's go like present day, and then we'll work back and we'll go back and forth.
Okay.
So you begin, and I'll be thinking if I know it.
Okay. So obviously, and a quick disclaimer, we're covering 10 cults today, and however long a podcast episode is, probably like an hour-ish. So we're obviously doing like the absolute highest level overview of these cults. I myself don't claim to be an expert, just an enthusiast. So just want to say that up front in case someone comes at us later and be like, you didn't touch on this part of this cult.
Yes, we are skimming the surface on these. We know there's going to be points we neglect. We're kind of trying to do the quick and dirty, like here's when they happened, here's what they were about, and here's like the major takeaway. That's kind of how I looked at it. So yes. Okay, ready when you are.
Okay. I'm going to start with the newest, I guess, which, since you said we'll do new and work our way back. So the newest is the World Peace and Unification Sanctuary Church. Have you heard of that?
I haven't. Sounds nice.
Well, let's see if you still say that after I tell you about it. This is very recent. It was just founded in 2015. I pulled my notes here from the Washington Post. They had a really good in-depth article from Tom Dunkel there. So the World Peace and Unification Sanctuary Church is an unofficial offshoot and sect of the Unification movement, which was founded by Hyungjin Sean Moon in 2015. Hyungjin Sean Moon is the youngest son of the Reverend Sun Myung Moon, the founder of the Unification movement. So to tell you about this cult, I have to actually go back in time to the founder's father's own cult.
Oh, wait, is this the Mooney's kid?
Yeah, it's his kid started his own cult, offshoot.
Family business. Okay, keep going.
Yeah, we could do a whole episode on just this cult. But the brief version. So in the 40s, recap for maybe some of you, in the 40s, the elder Reverend Moon said that Jesus appeared to him when he was 15 and asked him to take on a special mission of completing God's kingdom on earth, which was called Cheontu-guk in his native Korean.
Okay.
He established a church in Seoul in 1954, dubbing it the Holy Spirit Association for the Unification of World Christianity. Some of these cults always have like these really long, like 6-word names.
Yeah, I've got a couple of those.
He codified his beliefs in a text titled Divine Principle. And the core construct says that Satan seduced Eve in the Garden of Eden, which is pretty standard fare. But this caused the fall of humankind by contaminating the bloodlines she and Adam transmitted through Cain and Abel. Thus, God tried again with Jesus to serve as the, quote, second Adam to find sin-free love and salvage man. But Jesus didn't live long enough to marry because he got crucified. So thus it became Sun Myung Moon's destiny to step in as the third Adam and redeem the world. Okay, so that's the father.
Right. So
I'm setting the stage here.
And the followers of that religion, that cult, were called Moonies, right? Is this the cult I'm thinking of? Okay. I had no idea that
the father's cult.
The father's cult. Yeah. Okay.
And so according to this Washington Post article, they got up to 110,000 members once they moved to the U.S. And so that's a lot. More. I think that's the most of any cult here. So the founder of this cult, Sun Myung Moon, married Hak Ja Han in 1960, and their followers hailed them as God's anointed true parents. So all this to say that the divine plan calls for the country, the U.S., to be ruled by their family, and Sean, their son, would take the reins as king of the United States. So if you're Sean, this all sounds great. I was born into this, cult of 110,000 members. I'm going to be king of the U.S. But according to him, not long after his father died in 2012, his mother put him on notice and said that I'm God. She said, I'm God, the mother.
Oh, she's shaking it
to which
off.
he replied, Mummy, please, you can't say that. Father's not going to be happy, which I think is fair. I don't think his father would have been happy.
No, it also implies that they definitely think he's still listening.
Well, if he's God, or no, he's God, let's see, God's true parents.
Okay, yeah, he might be able to. Okay.
Yeah. So he says that she phased him out of the church, stopped taking his calls. That's when he, in 2015, publicly renounced his mother for hijacking the church and editing his father's religious texts. He has since taken to calling his own mother the Whore of Babylon. He then founded his own offshoot sect, which is the cult now that we're talking about, the World Peace and Unification Sanctuary Church, which as of 2019 had at least 200 members.
200. So
yeah, which is still a lot for a cult.
That's a respectable group.
Yeah.
But it isn't like it doesn't sound like the main group followed him into the new endeavor.
Yeah, like you said. So the last cult, the primary cult that this broke off of, had 110,000 members. Yeah. And now we're down to 200-ish.
Yeah.
And here's where it gets really weird.
Oh.
I saw pictures of this because the Washington Post writer that wrote this was inside the camp, and he took all kinds of pictures. So I recommend seeking it out. Maybe we can put a link in the show notes or something. So a key pillar of this cult is that the importance of owning a gun, particularly the lethal lightweight AR-15 semi-automatic.
Oh, dear Lord.
Yeah. Pastor Sean, the founder, says the book of Revelation makes multiple references to how Christ one day will rule his earthly kingdom with a rod of iron. That's from the Bible. Although Revelation was written long before the advent of firearms, Pastor Sean concluded that the, quote, rod of iron was Bible speak for the modern-day AR-15, and that Christ, not being a tyrant himself, will need armed sovereigns to help him keep peace in his kingdom.
Oh, man. This makes me so sad, actually.
Yes. So those photos I was talking about, the pastor here, Pastor Sean, wears a crown during his sermons that is made out of bullets, ammunition. And when he preaches, he's holding his AR-15 semi-automatic rifle. And in the congregation of a few hundred people, they're all holding their own semi-automatic rifles. So there's 200 semi-automatic weapons in one place. It's a recipe for disaster.
Where is this cult based?
Pennsylvania.
Are you kidding? Where?
I'm not kidding.
Well,
I wish I was kidding.
Where in Pennsylvania? I am not far from Pennsylvania. How did I not ever hear of this?
Well, there was some controversy because I think it was the Lakeland shooting, maybe, in Florida.
Yeah.
Right around that is when this piece that I'm reading from came out.
Oh, man.
And in October of that year, this church, the World Peace and Unification Sanctuary, the pastor invited the congregation to show their willingness to defend their families, communities, and nation by bringing their semi-auto rifles to a service, and their weapons were blessed.
Oh my gosh. I mean, suddenly the 200 number sounds so much more dangerous. Like when the idea of them all being in one place with guns, and it's a cult/religious group, so it could be families and kids.
It reminds me of the Branch Davidians who stockpiled weapons.
Totally. Wow. That's a way to start the list. That's very current, very recent, and sounds really scary. And also sounds very like a power struggle. Sounds like a family fractured power struggle.
Well, it is, because there's 13 children so he's one of 13, the founder of this offshoot. And he has some family members on his side, including his brother, which I think is arms manufacturer. He works for one.
Okay.
And then I think everyone else in the family is on the other side. So yeah, it's a power struggle, and they're still active today. They still have all these guns as far as I know. So I don't know. Something to watch.
Definitely.
Yeah, they're in Northeast Pennsylvania, by the way.
Northeast Pennsylvania. Okay. Wow. So that's not like Pennsylvania. That's not.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm probably going to maybe have to edit that out. I think that's a really disparaging term, like for everybody.
It's okay. We just made fun of the 10 worst states in America.
I mean, I'm from New Jersey. I can take a joke, about a state.
And I'm from Oklahoma.
Okay, good. So, and I live in Queens in New York City now. So we've got it covered. Okay, well, that's
crazy,
wild.
right? And that's not even the craziest one. I'd say this is one of the tamer ones I have today, honestly.
Okay, this is going to be a wild conversation because I didn't see the guns coming. I really didn't. That was a surprise. Well, let's go here to this very, very different place. So I'm going to, on the very first one, break my own rule and tell you that the practice in this cult is actually probably ancient, but it had a resurgence in the mid-90s. And a person made it very popular and also very deadly. So that's why I decided to let it slide. I don't know if you have any guesses, but it is I'm gonna just see if you have a guess in case of maybe you've heard of it. It's the belief that you can live without food or liquid and only subsist on air for long periods of time. Have you ever heard of this?
It's not Om Shinrikyo, is it?
No.
In Japan? No,
but Japan has a lot of cults.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So this is called Breatharianism. Literally Breatharianism. And it is what I said, the belief that you can just live on air. A follower of Breatharianism would be called a light eater. Because
a light eater?
Yes, because its roots are yogic and Indian.
Yeah.
From the East. And so it could also be called pranic nourishment. And prana is a Hindu term for from the source. And they believed sun was the source. So you can exist on light and air. The first documented breatharian practices are in the 1600s. And it got a little bit popular again in the 70s. But then there was a woman from Australia in the mid 90s. And she's who I really want to focus on because she kind of like rebranded breatharianism and was like, this is a appealing lifestyle. And she was herself very attractive, blonde and thin and claimed.
What a name, by the way, of the cult.
Breatharianism. Yeah, it's hard to get out. But once you get it, you kind of understand. So
these cults really need a marketing team to help them with their naming because it's never good.
Well, that comes up in a couple of my cults. They literally change the name. Like one does actually do a rebrand. And also this woman might have been a marketing person because her name is Jas Muheen. And she claims that she can go for several days without eating. She can go just with 300 calories a day for weeks at a time, just a cup of tea here or there when she needs it, because her spiritual enlightenment is she's so connected. She has clarity of thought and the air that she lives in is pure. And so that's why all of this is possible. Fun fact, her name is not Jas Muheen, it's Ellen Greaves. But I don't think people were as inclined to follow and listen and starve themselves for a woman named Ellen. So she went with Jas Muheen, which does have a little more gravitas. So
sounds much more important.
Totally.
No offense to Ellens out there.
Yeah, no offense to Ellens, but Jas Muheen sounds mysterious and compelling, right? Like she knows something we don't know. So she was actually just a business analyst on business, and she claimed it was because she meditated and people really kind of were attracted to her message. So she started writing books on it and selling them. And then she started, I guess, the practice of breatharianism. And she already had this audience. So she was like, okay, I'll have workshops now and charge people thousands of dollars to come on my retreats to not eat for 5 days. And people from all over the world went to do it. And, I think we've seen fasting is a thing, right? Like it's in the Bible. Yeah. It is part of an attempt to be closer to God, to push away comforts. Lots of religions, valid, viable religions, Jews, Christians. Mm-hmm. What's the Muslim? I don't know if they call it a holiday, but they celebrate Ramadan. That's a really long fast, right? So fasting is legitimately a spiritual practice. So I don't want to discard that. But this was very not that. This was really dangerous, actually. And while she said there was this spiritual component, most people really flocked to her as a weight loss thing. And that's what's, I think, super manipulative about what she did, was because she probably knew that, right? Lots of people will say they want to be more spiritually enlightened. And hey, if they lose like 25 pounds while doing so, like that's not the worst. So she says she actually exists on cosmic particles, microfood. She has all these weird words for like the things she gets from the air.
Microfood, huh?
Microfood. I don't even know what the definition of that is. Oh, but I didn't mention, if she gets really, really hungry and she can't kind of push through, she will take a mouthful of food and just roll it around and then spit it out just to get the taste.
So is this woman like 40 pounds? Like, have you seen a picture of her?
She's very thin, but she doesn't look malnourished, which leads to people saying she eats at home. So she's done interviews and her food, there's lots of food in her house, but she's like, I have a husband and a daughter. Like they eat, they're not breatharians. So very thin, conventionally attractive, I would say. So she builds this following. People are very interested in what she's doing. 60 Minutes, the Australia version, goes to her home and challenges her. It's 1998. They challenge her to fast on camera 24/7 to see how long she can go, which really seems irresponsible. They do have a doctor on set. There's medical parameters, but they're like, let's watch her not eat. And so she does, and she's really struggling. 48 hours in, she's not doing well. She's deteriorating. The doctor's getting nervous. She's showing active signs of starvation. And she said it's because where they've put her, it's not in her home. It's too close to a city. So there's smog. And so the prana energy is not clear. Her chakras are all jacked up. So she demands to be taken elsewhere. So they take her closer to the mountains in the country, and she like calms down. But the doctor says, no, she didn't. Like she's still looking really, really bad. So several days in, she'd lost 14 pounds. And the doctor said, you're going to have organ failure. So they shut it down. She says she could have gone endlessly, and that she only stopped because the TV show was now going to be liable if she injured herself seriously or died while doing this.
How many days was that she made it before they shut it down?
It's weird. I couldn't find it in anything. They said she started showing serious symptoms 48 hours, but she pushed through to a new location. So I feel like it was at least 1 or 2 more days. So maybe like 5 or 6 days.
That's so insane.
I mean, it's like 2 days to me is insane.
Like 9 hours to me.
Oh, I know. I don't think there's any spiritual practice that can like soften my hanger. So this really kind of gets bad when, not surprisingly, 5 of her tens of thousands of followers, she's made a very nice living for herself at this point. Oh
God, I didn't realize.
Oh yeah. Selling books, selling workshops, very popular. And, to varying degrees of success. 5 of her followers, they're called light eaters again, would die while attempting to follow her practices. But she wasn't criminally responsible for them because all of these people had free will and she didn't force anyone to do it, but they were all in the middle of her suggested fast and they all died. She goes so far as to double down and say, if you haven't found the light that will nourish you, you may have the intention to become a breatharian, but in fact, you may just be putting yourself through food deprivation. So it's like, if you're not like me, you're just starving yourself. But if you're someone who can connect with the light and the energy, then you're doing it. So those people basically failed. And
she took no responsibility or empathy in these people that died from her program?
No, that was her response, was they were clearly not breatharians. They were just starving themselves. And that's not what she's about. There are even more recent cases I saw in the last 5 years of people doing retreats around this. And one guy in a GQ magazine said he does it because I feel cleaner, sharper. I feel fearless. His name was a.k.a. Ricardo, and he leads these retreats now. So it's still an ongoing practice. Obviously, doctors call it a pseudoscience. They say this is very dangerous and not to trust any leader who is espousing these things. But that's Joss Muheen, a.k.a. Ellen Grieve, from Australia and breatharian.
What happened to her? Is she still around?
Good question. She's definitely still alive, and she's in her late 50s-ish right now. And recent pictures of her, she looks really good. I will say, a good skincare regime. I'm sure she eats healthy when she does eat. I don't think she's published anything. She hasn't come out with any new books. I think after these 5 deaths, this happened all before 2000. I think it kind of tempered down a little bit. So I think it's good news that I didn't see anything recent around her.
Yeah. Well, death will tend to temper things.
Yeah. Death will really like slow your roll if you're like going in on a business.
Yeah.
So that's the story of Joss Maheen.
Oh man, what is it about cults and death? They just seem to find each other, don't they?
It's too true. You know, are people going to die again in your next one?
Well, I have one where there's no death, I think.
Oh,
but
good.
The rest, definitely death. Oh, the next one, you're going to be happy about this. So we're going to cover Love Has Won.
Okay.
And you and I talked briefly about Love Has Won and that we're both really fascinated by it, but neither of us have really done a deep dive into it.
Exactly.
So we're going to do a semi-deep dive here.
Okay, great.
Love Has Won has been in the news recently because their founder was found dead this year. But let's rewind, going all the way back to 2006, when this was founded by Amy Carlson, known to her group of 12 to 20 members as Mother God. Mm-hmm. So think about it. The last few cults we talked about, 200 members branching off from a cult that had 110,000. Yours, I think you mentioned 5 or 10,000. Yep. This one just has 20 or less at any given time. It's just interesting how, it just changes the whole dynamic. You know, when you're one of thousands, it feels so much less like a cult, right? Like you would never look around and be like, I'm in a cult.
Right.
But with 20, it's just, I don't know. It just stood out to me. By the way, I forgot to mention the notes I'm reading came from Insider.com, The Independent, The Denver Post. Rebecca will put them in the show notes.
Yes.
So Amy Carlson, Mother God, 2006, founded Love Has Won. According to her family, before that, she grew up in Dallas, Texas, and was a straight A student. In her early adult life, however, she began to talk increasingly about outlandish concepts such as starships. And it gets weird here. It is believed, though, that Carlson actually did not find the initial group, but was recruited and subsequently became the group's leader later. The group was originally known under the name Galactic Federation of Light.
Oh, wow.
Cool name. I'll give them that.
I mean, it's cool, but it's very like narrow. Love Has Won has got
narrow.
More broad appeal, I think.
But at least anybody in the world can pronounce, or at least anyone that speaks English can pronounce this name, as opposed to the one you just did where I still can't say the name.
Yeah, I know. Don't try. It's weird. Yeah, that's a good point.
So anyway, after joining the Galactic Federation of Light, Carlson left her third husband, her children, and her job as manager at McDonald's and ceased contact with her family. So she kind of just went off the radar. Okay. And then became the leader of that group, renamed it. Actually, I don't think they ever called themselves Love Has Won. That might just be a media name. The group her followers proclaimed that Carlson was a divine 19 billion year old being who had birthed all of creation. She claimed that she had been reincarnated already 534 times, including as Jesus, Joan of Arc, Marilyn Monroe,
I heard that.
Cleopatra, and she proclaimed that she would lead 144,000 people into a mystical fifth dimension. I want to pause there for a minute. I'm not trying to make light of, anybody or anything, but it just baffles my mind how normal, ordinary people can, I guess, be suckered, or at least they just go down this path that leads them to believe in these things with their whole heart.
I know.
It's just so fascinating.
It is. I have a lot to say about this, like probably more than we can fit in because I want to hear the rest of your story. But
okay,
I think that's a really important piece of the cult puzzle, like how and why it happens.
For sure.
And I really try not to like blame or shame cult members or survivors because it is hard to, in this kind of context, when you hear certain specifics, you are like, I don't understand how you could believe it, but you have to want to. Why?
Well, I think part of it too is, I was listening today to your interview with, I can't remember her name, but she wrote the book, It's Not a Cult, about NXIVM. Something she said in that episode stood out that applies here, which I think is no one signs up to join a cult, right?
Exactly.
You don't sign a piece of paper or contract that says this is a cult, I'm signing it. You never think you're in a cult,
nope.
right?
Nope.
So it's like this gradual thing that, a lot of times these people have experienced trauma recently and they're looking for answers. They're looking for something and they find someone that talks to them in a way that makes them feel better.
I think that's exactly right. And it's such a gradual thing that cult leader doesn't lead with the craziest thing that we just heard. It's probably not at the first meeting, It's
like Scientology. They don't start with Xenu, right?
Right. It's a slow burn. Oh, she sounds exhausted because she's had like 5. What did she have? 5 reincarnations?
No, 534 actually.
Sorry.
Excuse you, including as Jesus. So she's been crucified. Joan of Arc, she's been burned at the stake. Marilyn Monroe, she died of overdose. Cleopatra, was Cleopatra assassinated? Maybe. Anyway, so she's now back again as Mother God, and she says, or during these years. Again, this was founded just 15 years ago. It's not that long.
Right.
She had several romantic partners throughout the group's history who she referred to as Father God and who played a counterpart role to Carlson in the theology of the group. And of course, to make matters worse, the group also adopted the QAnon conspiracy theory, stating that it described a divine plan. In fact, father in a past life.
Oh, man.
And that she had spoken to the spirit of deceased actor Robin Williams, who she claimed was the archangel Zadkiel.
Okay. I mean, this is sad. Yes. This is actually just like she was not well, I don't think, right?
Yeah. Well, no. And I wonder often, not just her, but lots of cults, like, do they believe everything they're saying? Or is it a matter of like they know they're leading people on, or a mix of both, probably?
I think there's a mix of both. And I think there's a spectrum. I think there's some real like deceptive, manipulative liars. And I think there's some people who believe their own nonsense or are delusional, or it could be mental health problems.
Right. Or you say your nonsense for so long that you do start to believe
you believe your own. Yeah.
Yeah. So a core group of about 12 to 20 members lived with her in Crestone, a small town in southwest Colorado. The group did daily live streams on YouTube in order to recruit more members, solicit donations, and promote new age products and vitamin supplements. So there, you can find a lot of this footage on YouTube.
Yep.
The group offered etheric surgery, which cost $88 per session, claiming that it could remove sickness and negative energy from the body. I have a quote here from one of the articles I read. It's from Rick Allen Ross, a cult expert.
Oh, he's been on here too.
Oh, has he?
He's awesome.
Okay, so you and your listeners know him. I must have missed that one. But he said that Love Is One was one of the most destructive cults that I have observed. Wow. It was a very controlled group with a very volatile and, in my opinion, dangerous leader. And this guy knows.
This guy knows. He literally, oh my gosh, he literally wrote the book, Cults Inside Out.
There you go. Free plug for you, Rick. So let's get to the recent news. In September of last year, 2020, it had been stated that Carlson was in poor health and was paralyzed from the waist down, with Carlson herself stating she had cancer. A photo from a few weeks before she is thought to have died shows her appearance to be emaciated, with thinning hair and discolored skin with a purplish hue.
Yes.
She had been ingesting large amounts of colloidal silver. Did you know this?
Yes.
Which the group had been promoting as a COVID-19 cure.
I know. It's so dangerous.
Yes, it says here that consuming colloidal silver over a long period of time can lead to blue-gray discoloration of the skin, which I can confirm from seeing photos of her.
Oh, she was fully purple.
And it could cause seizures and organ failure. Don't want to do it.
Were they
the official Tennis podcast recommendation is not to do it. And they were, I don't know if they were selling it, they were at least endorsing it.
They were endorsing it. They sold a product. I watched some of the weird Facebook videos. I don't know if this was something they sold. That is really, really, really scary.
Yeah. Well, if you see the videos or the photos, you can just see this gradual worsening of her physical condition. And, I'm sure she feels she's invincible because of her belief system, or at least that she'll be reincarnated.
Right. Not her first rodeo. She's like, I'll be back, guys. Yeah. She
was last seen alive by someone outside the group on April 10th, 2021. It was, 18 days later, on the 28th of that, the mummified corpse of Amy Carlson was discovered in a trailer near their home in southwest Colorado. Its state of decay suggested she had been dead for several weeks. She was 45 at the time of her death. Now, here's the thing, though. Her body was found in a sleeping bag, which was wrapped in Christmas lights. Her face was covered in glitter, and the eyes were missing. And so that was, I guess, a makeshift shrine for her death.
I'd heard the Christmas lights. I did not hear about the glitter or the eyes.
I don't know where the eyes are either.
I don't want to, I was going to be like, nobody's seen them.
If you're walking around Southwest Colorado and you step on something squishy, might be Amy Carlson's eyeball. So there is more news, though, because group members are reported to be facing a mix of charges, including child abuse, because there were 2 children living there.
Oh my gosh. I do remember that headline.
Yeah. It's just terrible.
So
I just can't imagine. I'm not sure their ages, though. Are you?
No, but I would say anyone, I think this is going to be traumatic for all involved. But yeah, anyone under the age of 18, this is going to be pretty bad. So I would say
Yeah.
it almost doesn't matter. It's so terrible.
Last thing is the group is still going under a different name called 5D Full Disclosure. They have a website
sorry, what was it called?
5D, as in like 4D, 5D, Full Disclosure.
Okay.
And they have a website if you'd like to join, Rebecca.
I would like to check it out. I won't join. I'm for sure going to look it up.
And HBO is doing a docuseries about the cult.
Well, that's like the best news we've had so far.
Right.
Wow.
There you go. Love is one.
So I feel like her death would be a great
Very
time
small.
for them to reevaluate, like, I don't know, we're not gaining traction. You know, if you're YouTube live streaming every day, you would think you could, I mean, that is the place to attract anyone and everyone. Like, I don't know.
Well, and again, not to beat a dead horse, but like just the delusion she must have had, 12 to 20, again, you're getting that reassurance from people around you that what you're saying is right. You are our mother God, but it's still a very small number.
Yeah.
It's just like I don't know. I think of all the cults I have on my list, this is the one that's like the most interesting from like a psychological study standpoint. Like,
right, because
it just fascinates
there's no
me.
group think almost at that small of a number, and you can't look around for what's that called, like bias confirmation bias.
Yeah.
Like everyone's doing the same thing. Like, sure, this is legitimate. I wonder, and I don't know, but I just like my gut tells me that that's probably a group of very vulnerable, misplaced people who found each other and like created their own little family, because I don't think it had the like compelling factors that a lot of these groups we're talking about had. I don't know. I even read somewhere that she was like incredibly verbally abusive.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I left all that out just because of time, but I definitely came across in my research that she was verbally and I think physically abusive as well to some members.
Okay.
You're welcome, everyone, for bringing you this great.
This one, this is a bad one. This is a downer. So hopefully we can only go up after this. And I actually am going to give a content warning before I talk about this one, because the deaths were just so violent. And I'm not going to go into any detail at all, but just even hearing what happened is pretty horrific. So trigger warning, if extreme violence in mass numbers affect you, you could skip this part for a few minutes or just listen with care. So this cult's interesting to me because, like many, it's sort of an offshoot of a legitimate religion or religious movement. So Catholicism is one of the world's biggest religions, and Uganda is a very Catholic country. I've actually been to Uganda, and
I think I know this one.
Yeah. So you know where this is going. And okay, so time period now, we are in the mid 90s, which is again crazy to think that this is so recent. I mean, I know that's not 2010 or 2020, but mid 90s, when you read this story, you feel like surely this was in like another era that I wasn't present and alive for. I'm aging myself, but I was very much a person in the world at that point. Okay, good. I'm sure I'm older, but that's okay. So we're going to talk about a woman who, her name is Credonia. I'm going to do my best here. Merwinde. We're just going to call her Credonia. And was a bartender. She wasn't super religious, and then she converted and she heard the message of Catholicism. And I guess her interpretation, I'm filling in blanks. Let me just tell you what happened. Credonia, she converted to Catholicism and started telling people that she could speak to the Virgin Mary. And I don't think that was a big deal, because I think a lot of Catholics think that they can speak, like Mary is their vessel to Jesus. And so maybe that didn't make a big impact, but she was convincing. She was like Joss Maheen. She was kind of cute and she was really appealing. Like she had a sweet face and she was from a normal family, and there was no like red flags around her that said, don't trust her. So people did start listening to her, and the area where she lived was incredibly poor, and she herself was not doing well financially. The bar closed. And so she started telling people that the world was going to end in
doomsday cult.
Yes, it's a doomsday cult. And she starts telling people that Mary told her the world is going to end in, guess which year? Any guesses, Nick?
Maybe 2000?
Yeah. Funny enough, it would be the year 2000. So she's hyping this up starting in the mid 90s, and she gets people to give them all their earthly possessions, which were very, very little, but their money, their clothes, everything goes to her.
But just remember these people, because this is Uganda in the 90s, these are probably desperate people that are already not doing well. Just wanted to add that color.
Absolutely. So the genocide in Rwanda, which borders Uganda, that happened in like 94. So this is all, I mean, the borders to other countries, I think Congo is in there. Like there's a lot of unrest in this region.
Yeah.
And most people aren't doing great. And she's just absolutely capitalizing off of it. And so she's building bigger and bigger compounds. People are giving her more and more stuff. And everybody believes that the world is going to end in the year 2000. And she's going to be the way. Her in with Mary will get them all to heaven. So they are covered. And so what happened was the year 2000 comes and goes. And everyone's like, we're still here. So's Credonia. And she starts feeling really pinned against a wall. They're getting suspicious. They're asking questions. They kind of start talking to each other and demanding their stuff back. And they want money and they want a place to stay. And she's panicked because she can't really return everything. And she's got leaders in place too. She has men who she enlists to take care of this. So what she does first is poisons a huge number of them through food. So she's offering them food, which, I mean, we all, this is actually so interesting now that I'm thinking about it in contrast to the choice to give up food to be a breatharian. And then when you're thinking about poverty and what people will do for food, what a privilege it is to give food up for any period of time. So
breatharianism feels like a very first world
absolutely. Yes.
Privileged cult.
And the people that followed her were Australian, European, and American for the most part. So they're eating this food and they're poisoned. And by the way, the number of people she has following her at this point is in the several thousands.
It's crazy.
It's hard to find an exact number, but this is like many, many villages. I mean, a lot of people. So for the remaining people that she didn't poison, she leads into the church, which is a very modest structure. She jam packs it with as many as she can, probably the estimates are like over 600. She tells them to come to church with their heads shaved and all in the same uniform. And she locks them inside and she torches the place. Now, in addition to this, she sends her men out and they just really in terrible ways beat and kill men, women, and children. The confirmed deaths are over 1,500, but nobody really knows. It's speculated it could be up to 3,000. And the ones that were burned left no trace. So they're unidentified. They just know there was this mass fire. I mean, we're talking bigger than Jonestown numbers. And I don't think many people have heard of Credonia in Uganda.
No. Did you mention the name of the cult as well? So people can look it up.
Oh my gosh. Way to bury the lead. Thank you, Nick. That's why you're here.
I thought you were building to it.
I would love to take credit for that. This is called the Movement for the Restoration of the 10 Commandments. I grew up in the church. I don't know about you, but I'm pretty sure do not murder is one of the 10 commandments, and also a terrible long name, Movement for the Restoration of the 10 Commandments. Doesn't even go with the Mary thing. I don't really understand it. It's very Old Testament. So that's the most awful and violent part. So we got through that. But to me, the creepiest, most mysterious and unsettling part is that she's never been seen again.
I was wondering if you were going to get there.
She was not caught or captured. No one's seen her. I went to Uganda in the year 2014, not knowing this story. I would have had my eyes out.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. And I would have been on my true crime mission to find Credonia, get some justice.
That is a great name, though, if you're going to be a cult leader. I mean,
right. I mean,
you know what I mean?
Yeah. And I think that's her given name. Pretty sure she didn't change it. So that's the truly tragic story of Movement for the Restoration of the 10 Commandments in Uganda with Credonia. You'd heard that one.
I have a few comments. Yeah. So
please.
I'd heard about this one because I mentioned we did our top 10 cults based on body count.
Right.
Which, Dr. Shiloh helped me with that one. And that cult was on there. That's where I learned about this cult. So yes, I was familiar with it. Let's not gloss over the fact that she did this just because her pride was hurt, that she was wrong on her date. Right? She killed all these people just so they'd stop saying, well, 2000 didn't happen, so when's the next end date? Right. Which, by the way, I'm not advocating for cults, but if you're going to start a cult, you better put that end date hundreds of years in the future.
Yeah, or have a clause, have a loophole. If it's not the year 2000 on this date, then this. Every other cult I've seen, every other doomsday, they don't respond like this. They just usually are oh, I got the message wrong. Here's the new one. Here's the new memo. And they do panic, but they try to regroup and salvage and damage control. I mean, something is wrong with this woman, like the violence
she
that
went
she
berserk.
had, the capability, you know, we don't know her backstory. There's not that much information about her. Who knows what happened to her in her childhood? I don't know, but this is like...
But like Jonestown, when Jim Jones instructed his men to kill the people that weren't voluntarily drinking the, not Kool-Aid, but...
Flavor Aid.
Thank you. I knew you'd know. The same thing, where this woman has her men go and kill people that aren't inside the church building. And so there's that sense of loyalty there to her, which I think it's a relatively young cult as far as timeline. I don't think they were around that long when this happened.
This 10 Commandments one? No, a few years.
2 years maybe.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I should give credit to Tori Telfer, the author and podcaster. She's why I know this one. We did an event together 2 years ago about women cult leaders, and she covered Joss Maheen and Credonia. So I'd forgotten about them, but they were back there and they resurfaced when I was researching.
This one definitely doesn't get enough attention. I'm guessing just because it's not English-speaking, Americanized cult, you know?
Exactly. And also no Americans were hurt in this story. And so, you know, Jonestown happened in another country, but the cult leader and all the followers mostly were Americans, so we're much more interested. And this was the 90s. I mean, we were all like watching Beverly Hills 90210, and this was happening. I am so thrilled to announce that Stamps.com is a sponsor of the show because I personally use and rely on Stamps.com. If you have ever received a t-shirt, mug, note, or sticker from yours truly, it has arrived to you via Stamps.com. Since 1998, Stamps.com has been an indispensable tool for nearly 1 million businesses. Stamps.com brings the services of the U.S. Postal Service and UPS right to your computer. Whether you're an office sending invoices, a side hustle Etsy shop, or a full-blown warehouse shipping out orders, Stamps.com will make your life easier. All you need is a computer and a standard printer. No special supplies or equipment. Within minutes, you're up and running, printing official postage for any letter, any package, anywhere you want to send it. And you'll get exclusive discounts on postage and shipping from USPS and UPS. Once your mail is ready, just schedule a pickup or drop it off. No traffic, no lines. Cut the confusion out of shipping. With Stamps.com's new Rate Advisor tool, you can compare shipping rates and timelines to easily find the best option. Save time and money with Stamps.com. There is no risk. And with my promo code POD, that's POD, you get a special offer that includes a 4-week trial plus free postage and a digital scale. No long-term commitments or contracts. Just go to Stamps.com, click on the microphone at the top of the homepage and type in POD, P-O-D. That's Stamps.com, promo code POD. Stamps.com. Never go to the post office again.
Hi, we're Eliza,
Allison,
and Carlin, and we're the hosts of Resolved Mysteries podcast. Our podcast follows the 80s and 90s television show Unsolved Mysteries, hosted by Robert Stack.
if you like true crime stuff, ghost stuff, alien stuff, this is your podcast.
We do in-depth research on all of the segments that Unsolved Mysteries aired and give you the latest updates on every case.
Resolved Mysteries podcast is available wherever you get your favorite pods. Join us, and perhaps you may be able to help
Solve a mystery.
All right, Nick, you're up.
All right. There's no death in this one. So this might be
Everyone take a breath.
a little palate cleanser.
Yes.
This one's very strange, but no death. Okay, so this is the Joy of Satan Ministries, or JOS for short.
Oh. Okay.
Yes. Have you heard of this one?
No, they're not
Most
messing
people don't
around.
associate joy with Satan.
No.
But they want you to know what it's about, right? And something about that I respect, to where, like, let's tell people what this is right up front.
Right.
Get the pretenders out of here.
Yes.
So it's founded in 2002 by Maxine Dietrich.
Okay.
The Joy of Satan cult advocates spiritual Satanism, presenting a unique synthesis of theistic Satanism, National Socialism, Gnostic paganism, Western esoteric. I can never say that word.
That's a lot.
Yeah, you got it. UFO conspiracy theories and extraterrestrial beliefs. So unlike Satanism and some other offshoots of that, they do believe in a literal Satan. So this is a theistic religion. Members believe Satan to be the true father and creator God of humanity, whose desire was for his creations, humanity, to elevate themselves through knowledge and understanding. Side note, but the devil, or at least Satan, was invented in the Bible there's no other source material for the Satan. So like, where did this belief system come from? I don't know.
Right.
So Maxine Dietrich, the founder, she conceived a theory of a metaphysical and ancient conflict between advanced extraterrestrial races. She then concluded Jews and the Abrahamic religions to be products of a hostile alien race responsible for the deposition of pagan religions and their pagan gods. So anti-Semitic, very much so, this cult. So sympathy towards National Socialism was incorporated in turn, furthering anti-Semitic theories with their ideology. And it was revealed in 2004 that Clifford Harrington, the chairman of the National Socialist movement, was the husband of Maxine Dietrich, this cult's founder. Joy of Satan presents various extraterrestrial theories. Tell me if any of these align with your personal beliefs, Rebecca.
Sure.
They affirm that Satan and the demons of the Goetia are sentient and powerful extraterrestrial beings responsible for the creation of humanity. That's pretty in line with your thoughts, right?
Most people know that about me, though.
One for one, okay. It's believed that one of the benign aliens, Enki, also known as Satan, created with his collaborators on Earth human beings through their advanced technology of genetic engineering. It's considered by Joy of Satan that most salient of his creations were the Nordic Aryan race. They declare that the reptilians have in turn created their own kind by combining their own DNA with the DNA of semi-animal humanoids, with the end result identified as the Jews.
Oh, this is just a vehicle for hate, this cult.
Yeah.
Okay.
They hate Jews.
Oh my gosh. This is bad.
But the good news is, well, I'll save that. There's a positive outlook on this.
I'm glad.
Believe it or not. Yeah, I have my work cut out for me to put optimism on this.
Yes.
It's theorized that after the benevolent extraterrestrials left Earth 10,000 years ago, the agents of the reptilians created their own religions, the Abrahamic religions, which began the deposition and defamation of their pagan gods as a result. Okay, so adherents of the Joy of Satan may also involve themselves in spiritual warfare. Again, much like Rebecca, I think, participating in rituals against those they believe to be enemies of Satan under the conviction to be in a largely spiritual war. So here's that optimism I mentioned. Despite all this shit, so far, they haven't actually acted on anything.
Okay.
I've not seen any stories of violence
to
animals or humans in regards to this cult. I don't know. Their opinions suck, but as long as they're not harming anyone, I don't know.
Yeah, they have the right to have their beliefs and to gather, I guess, and talk about them. But that sounds like the whole purpose of the organization, which is just awful.
It sounds like a long-winded way to hate the Jewish people.
Exactly. And also a lot of effort, to put a website together and have all this made up evil spiritual aspect and terminology to it. It's weird.
They're trying to justify their hatred.
Right.
So they're taking the long road.
Yeah. And they're burying it under, you have to listen to hear it too. So they're probably a lot of people are just going to hear Satan and move along. So
yeah. No, you're right. I think that's intentional.
Wow. Never heard of that.
Yeah.
I'm dying to know where that Dietrich woman is. I'd like to know. I feel like it's going to be Germany, and I'm not just saying that. But the name is German. So I just feel like, did this have a European hub, the socialist? I don't know. Maybe they don't ever say because it's a website. Maybe they keep it very online presence, and it isn't like the geography of it doesn't matter. Yeah.
I'm looking here. Maxine Dietrich is in Florida.
Oh, good grief. We don't want her. I mean, I'm not in Florida, but as in America, I really thought we could be pawning her off in another country. Oh, man.
So, yeah, now we're taking shots at Florida. Yeah. How many states are still safe after our talk so far?
I know. Seriously. Well, this is actually the perfect segue. Is there anything else we needed to talk about? Joy of Satan? Okay. Because for my next cult, we're going to go from Taiwan to California to Texas to New York. And
oh my God,
it's not going to take too long because most of what happens of note is in Texas, of course. So this cult is called, well, there's three, like some cults we've touched on and others. It goes through a couple iterations till they get it right. It started off the Chinese Soul Light Research Association, and it moved into God's Salvation Church. It was also called Chen Tao, also called the True Way Cult. Have you heard of this / these?
No, but land on a name.
I know. For the most part, I'm going to call it Chen Tao, and that's because the leader is Han Ming Chen. So I know Tao is like the belief of Chen Tao, I think is about him. So, and True Way is pretty good too, True Way cult. So this originated in Taiwan by this man that I mentioned, Han Ming Chen. He was a sociology professor and an atheist. However, for some reason that I couldn't really ascertain from anything I read, he decided to go to a religious cultivation group just to learn. I mean, he's a professor. I mean, maybe he was just curious.
Because he's atheist, you said, right?
He's an atheist, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So I'm imagining it was more like a sociological observation or something. But he left it thinking, like, I think I could do better, is how I imagine it in his mind. So he decides to form, this is 1993, he forms the Chinese Soul Light Research Association, which was a mix of Buddhism, Taoism, and UFOlogy. Little trifecto.
Yeah,
So,
they'll go together so well.
yeah, I know.
After all.
I know. I mean, it sounds like a lot of these leaders really like to just hodgepodge things they like from different religions and put them together into their own and make them be the god, basically.
Yeah.
So Chen believed that the world has been through 5 tribulations dating back to the age of dinosaurs, and that all the survivors of the 5th tribulation were in North America. So
Of course.
he and his followers took off from, and at this point, I don't know how many of them there are, to be honest. There is a great article that I will put in the show notes. There's not a ton about them, but I don't know how many people it is, but it was sizable. More than 20, like Love is One.
Yeah, more than 20.
Less than 5,000. So they go to San Dimas, California, of all places. It's a northeast suburb of Los Angeles. And some shady stuff happened there. There was a sheriff incident, had to go to the house. There was an alleged kidnapping. And that's
There's always kidnapping mixed in somewhere.
Yeah, this kid, maybe against their own will, maybe they wanted to be there, hard to say. Turned out they were 18, so it was kind of like a non-thing. And I'm kind of brushing past it because the main event happens when Chen decides that God, or doesn't decide, knows that God is coming back to Earth via a UFO on a cloud, and that God would look just like, guess who, Nick?
Him.
Yes.
Right? Yeah.
He would look just like Chen, but he's not going to come back to California. He's definitely going to come back to Garland, Texas. So group moves from LA to Garland, Texas. And it's said that he thought Garland sounded like God's land. So that's where they go. And they have money. I hadn't heard like where the money came from, but they bought several houses on this suburban cul-de-sac in Garland, Texas. It's 1998 now. And you can just imagine a Texas suburb and like some Taiwanese.
I've been to Garland, Texas. Yeah.
Oh, that's so fun. So they move and they wear white cowboy hats, the cult members, but they're all Taiwanese. So, they don't blend, and the neighbors are concerned. But Chen is like a really nice neighbor. He's very concerned about being a good neighbor, and he leaves them notes, but he is getting concerned because God's second coming is imminent. So he calls a press conference. He lets all the neighbors know. He lets all the TV channels know, because he says God is coming back at 10 a.m. on March 31st, 1998 on a cloud. I also appreciate his specifics. He's just like 10 a.m. this day, this year. And even more so on a single television channel across all of North America. So everyone was going to watch it on the same channel. He calls the press conference. Super awkward. God doesn't come.
Oh, the press conference was during the time window when God. Okay.
He wanted it to be live on the air. So
that I do appreciate.
Oh,
yeah.
Do I wish I lived in Garland, Texas? Never before knowing this story have I ever wanted to be in Texas more. The whole neighborhood comes out to watch, and they're like, "You're still here." And cops have surrounded him because they do feel like this could get weird. And then, unlike our girl Credonia, Chen says, "I was wrong. I'm going to give you 10 minutes and you can stone or crucify me."
Oh my God.
It's not funny, but I kind of like his humility. He's like, "I totally got this wrong." And
talk about the literal opposite of Credonia.
Literal opposite. He's like, "Yeah, just, I don't know how I got this wrong." So then his followers were like, "Wait, this isn't even the first thing he's gotten wrong." He said that we were going to find Jesus of the West in California and that he was going to look like Abraham Lincoln, which made me feel like they should have gone to New York and look in Brooklyn, but that's beside the point. So
this guy's just making up shit.
This guy is just making up shit, and people are now starting to clue in. So the group disbands. a couple stay. And, I really do wish I could know their number, because it says I wrote that they lost 2/3 of their members. So I'll try to fact check this and update how many people this was, but mostly they went their own ways. Chen and the remaining members moved to upstate New York, but little is known about them since 2001. And Chen's whereabouts have never been confirmed since the year 2001, which again,
how does that happen in this world we live in?
Cult leader just going like off the grid. I don't get it. So
not just any cult leader who had news cameras present to see God come from a cloud. Right. That was him. And when it doesn't happen, he says, "Oh, sorry, stone me, please, or crucify me, please." But
I love that he put that out there as an offer, and people are like, "No, we're good. We're just gonna." And like, there's like these articles, and people just start kind of going back to their house. Like, it was just so. Could you imagine the awkwardness? So yeah, I don't know where he is. I don't know if the True Way cult Chen Tao is still practicing, but this all happened in the 1998 in this year country.
He could be listening right now, for all we know.
Chen.
Probably, right?
Fill in some blanks.
I would love if, in an alternate reality, he calls the press conference and it doesn't happen at 10 a.m. and everyone's thinking, and he, just like you said, and then like 10:02, everyone's starting to disperse, and then God comes down from the cloud right there.
And he's like,
how different the world would
people. Yeah, I know. He's like, so I was off by 2 minutes. Stone me. Yeah, so that's that one. Yeah, I should have ended on that one. That was almost fun. Considering where we've been.
And where we're going.
Oh boy. Okay.
So I have 2 left, and they're both violent.
Okay.
Okay. Because again, what goes together like peanut butter and jelly more than cult and death?
It's true. Okay.
So my sources here are the Vox and Teller report. This is the Knutby Filadelfia, but spelled with an F.
What?
Not like the city. This is in Sweden.
Oh, okay. This is shocking.
Yeah, this is different. So Knutby Filadelfia with an F. This cult gave rise to one of Sweden's most famous true crime cases, but it's gotten relatively little attention in the U.S. media.
Ooh.
I think I read there's a major series coming out on this, actually. In the small town of Knutby, and that's Knutby. I love that fucking name, though, for a town.
Charming.
Knutby.
Yeah.
Or maybe, Knutby? I don't know. I'm going with Knutby. This is the early 2000s. The church, known as Knutby Philadelphia, evolved into a bizarre cult revolving around the worship of a woman claiming to be the bride of Christ and a manipulative, predatory pastor named Helge Fossmo, who exploited multiple women in the congregation.
Oh, boy.
Because that's what you do when you're a cult leader. Among the many women who became victims of Fossmo, he's the pastor, was a young woman named Sarah Svensson, 26-year-old woman. She was vulnerable and easily influenced and became the pastor Fossmo's mistress after he convinced her that it was God's will for her to do that.
Okay.
Because, of all the important messages God's going to send to you, it's, hey, you should hook up with that one there.
Right.
So later, after Fossmo grew tired of her, as that can happen sometimes, the cult punished Svensson for her infidelity because she was actually married.
Oh my gosh.
To someone else in the congregation. So Fossmo tells her, God wants you to be with me. And then once he grows bored, he tells the congregation to punish her.
Throws her under the bus. Yeah, lovely.
But Fossmo decided to carry out the punishment himself, which he did by locking her in a bedroom for months and subjecting her to, quote, gut-wrenching abuse at his hands. The church knew of this torture and did nothing about it. So he decided to manipulate Svensson further. That's the woman who was his mistress. He manipulated her into carrying out a series of murders for him, once again, claiming to be speaking on behalf of God. So on the morning of January 10th, 2004, 30-year-old IT entrepreneur Daniel Lin was shot in the head and chest and seriously wounded in his home. 2 hours later, it was discovered that his employee and neighbor Alexandra had also been shot in her bed. The woman that was shot was the wife of the pastor Fossmo, the one that started all this.
Oh, shoot.
Yeah, so he convinced his mistress to kill his wife, and someone his wife worked with, maybe, it doesn't say, but maybe he assumed they were having an affair. So this only lasted a day, though, until Sarah Svensson, the mistress, confessed to both shootings, and 2 weeks later, the pastor was arrested. But get this is where it gets weird. In early 2010, Svensson received permission to live on her own during a 6-month transition period. So she presumably returned to society in late 2010, but Swedish law prevents the disclosure of any details. So she did, I think, like 2 years in prison.
Okay.
And left and is now back in society and no one knows where she is.
That is really sad. Also really highlights the difference in Sweden and American criminal justice systems.
Yeah. And unfortunately, we're just, you're right. We're just scratching the surface here. So we don't know all the details. There's not a lot out there because even if we wanted to do a deep dive, it's all in Swedish, hasn't been translated.
And you said they protect her as an ex-offender. Yeah. They don't release that information. Again, a difference in their country. Like you can find out a lot more here about someone's record.
Yeah, it's all public record.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we were in Sweden and we're going to travel again. This is fun too because we're globetrotting. Now we're going to go to Japan. This is a wild one. I think Japan looks absolutely beautiful. So this is also a good one because it's a little bit funny and nobody was hurt. That's not true. A couple people were hurt, but it wasn't too bad and nobody died.
That's the important thing.
Yeah, exactly. At this point, the bar is death. So 1997, a very good year. Some people I know might have graduated high school that year. I don't know. Some
people might have been in second grade that year.
Oh, wow. That's just rude. You're on my podcast. Come on. You could be like, oh, I was right behind you.
97 was great. I think Titanic came out that year.
I'll tell you, my prom song was Mariah Carey's Sweet Fantasy, but the ODB remix, Old Dirty Bastard. It's a good one. Might have to play a clip. Okay. So we're into it's a good one. It's a good version. This cult is called Honohana, and it roughly translates to flower of the law, which sounds beautiful.
Yeah.
And it's very misleading, though, because this is a cult that offered a twist on palm reading. They read a different part of the body. Any guesses? Don't make it too weird. It's literally, I would almost say the opposite of a palm reading.
The foot, the bottom of the foot.
Yes. So there was a man named, I don't know if it's Hojin or Hogan, but I'm going to say Hogan Fukunaga. And he claimed that he could diagnose health issues and cure diseases by reading people's feet. It sounds crazy, but we did buy into the whole palm reading things.
Well, some of us did.
Some of us did. I guess I meant the collective we, like people have accepted that as a thing, at least for entertainment. So, but this is different because it is really specifically around medical issues. Also not a doctor, this man. So he gets a following and people really start bringing their feet to him to read, and he establishes
I just imagine people walking up holding their severed feet to him.
Seriously, this is kind of sounding more like a horror film, but he forms a group, this Honohana, in 1997. And it was shortly after this, after he's now got the established group in place, that he realizes, I don't know how he'd missed it before, but he was in fact the reincarnated Christ and Buddha. So he was already a preacher. That had been going on since 1980, but he was more importantly saddled with debt. And the spiritual epiphany he had, he realized was a business opportunity as well. So he started charging for the foot readings. He had this group in place. He had the church, he had the group. He's reincarnated. People believe him. How much do you think in 1997 would a foot reading go for in US dollars? I don't know what the yen was.
So I would pay, I would pay $0 for a foot reading.
Yeah. I
would pay to not have my foot read or handled by anyone.
Thank you.
However, I don't know, $25?
Oh, no. Our friend Fukunaga felt this was worth $900 a read.
And people were paying this?
People were bringing their savings and their sick family members to him to read. At its height, Honohana had 30,000 followers. There's not a lot of information on this cult, like not a lot at all. So I don't know what that meant in terms of a following. Did that mean people who came to see him for a reading? So he also had leaders in place. So he would train them in foot reading and he would have retreats like the Breatharians, and people would pay for a 5-day retreat in US dollars. You're going to fall off your chair. $22,000.
And are they just like sniffing each other's feet and reading each other's feet for 5 days? What are they doing?
Yeah, they are. And the Fukunaga leader tells the men, and I think it was just men that he trains, that they should use their spiritual wisdom to look at the feet and assess. There's a lot of like touching and feeling and looking from different angles, but also that they can lie if necessary. The actual quote, and I'll put the source in the show notes, is you should use your wisdom and say things, even if they may not actually be true. They also tell the followers that they have to buy expensive objects like scrolls and decorative ornaments for their home that will cure disease and ward off evil spirits.
Hang on, are you reading the description for my podcast on Apple Podcasts?
Scam 101. So they start coming under scrutiny because they're making a ton of money and people are not getting accurate. People are not seeking out medical treatment. They're seeking this out. So Japanese government didn't love that. So they do come under investigation. At this point, this is 1997, they'd made $500,000 in this cult business. Now, fun fact, Fukunaga became friends with Gandhi and he got invited to the Democratic National Convention fundraising dinner for the Clintons. And
in Japan?
No, in the United States. Fukunaga and Gandhi, best buds apparently, presented the Clintons with a $325,000 check. So this is interesting because this is 1996 and everything I read was 97. So they had money. Maybe maybe 97 was like the peak, but it had been happening before. So they presented them with this check. I guess word of the investigation got out and the DNC did return the check because they were not convinced the money belonged to him rightfully. So that was good news. I thought, well, that's good. I'm really glad to read that part. There was a big investigation. Many of his trainers were investigated and convicted of fraud and a lot of kind of white collar crimes. And the leader himself, Fukunaga, was sentenced to 15 years in the year 2000. So I don't know. I assume he's out. I didn't read anything recent, but he served a pretty hefty term for scamming people out of this much money. It's also said that he trained his sub-leaders. I don't know what the word I'm looking for.
Trainees,
foot readers in training. And he put them through some very grueling kind of initiations in extreme climate settings for the retreats. So there were also some charges of abuse towards the people that worked for him, not his followers or the people that went for the readings. So yeah, he made a whole business and cult out of pretending to know what your feet says about your health.
And then trying to give $325,000 of foot money to the Democrats in the United States.
With Gandhi.
With Gandhi. What a sentence. That is a comedy movie waiting to happen.
Right? Like, how have we never heard this story before? It's so rich.
Well, that's the same thing about all these cults. They're all so fascinating and underreported for sure. My last one, it's up there for most interesting. It's only short because there's not a lot of info on it. This is the True Russian Orthodox Church.
Oh.
My sources here are Vox and CNN. I actually couldn't find a date that it was founded, but I'm based on other things, I'm fairly confident it was 2000 or later. It's an independent Russian Orthodox-like doomsday cult founded by Pyotr Kuznetsov. Sorry.
Russian's hard.
Yes. The self-name of the group was actually Heavenly Jerusalem, as that's what it's translated to. The group broke away from the Russian Orthodox Church, considering it insufficiently orthodox. Its members were not allowed to eat processed food. They were not allowed to watch television. They were not allowed to handle money. They rejected barcodes, national identification number, and passports because they contained satanic symbols, the number of the beast. November 2007, somewhere around 30 members of the group holed themselves up in a cave in Russia's Penza region, threatening mass suicide if authorities tried to intervene. The leader had told them to hide themselves away in the cave to await the end of the world, which he predicted would take place in 2008. So, there's a kicker here. But before I tell you the kicker, these 30 people that are not allowed to do all these things, they hold themselves up in a cave for almost a year until the end of the world. And they tell the authorities, if you try to get us out, we're going to kill ourselves. The leader is not in the cave with them. He stays outside the cave and says, wait in the cave until May. And they go in November. At some point, not right away, but at some point he was arrested while they were inside the cave. But my reading of it, and this, so it's possible there's facts I'm missing, but from what I can tell, he told him to go in the cave, wait it out, and he was going to just live a normal, quote unquote, normal life outside the cave. And then in May, that world would end.
Oh, okay.
So after about 6 months, they'd been in the cave 6 months, men, women, children. 14 members came out of the cave after melting snow caused part of the cave to collapse. And in May 2008, this is the month he predicted the end of the world, the last 9 members of the cult emerged from the bunker due to the toxic fumes produced by 2 cult members who had died.
Oh, no.
Yes. So at least 2 people died in the cave. It was enough to finally drive the rest out. So everyone's out of the cave now besides those 2. And in May, same month, later that month, after removing the dead bodies, the cave was blown up by the government to prevent more people from going down there. My last bullet is the most interesting. He reported the founder, Kuznetsov, I'm really sorry, Russian people. He reportedly attempted suicide when his doomsday prophecy didn't come true. He did not succeed. He fled and his whereabouts are unknown.
Oh, shoot.
Oh, shoot.
He's with Credonia and Chen. They're all somewhere, and they're like, somehow they're talking about us and where we went, and here we all are.
You know how sometimes bands will like split and form super bands?
Yeah.
They got to form a super cult, right?
Oh,
Take
man.
these 3 leaders, combine, mishmash all the beliefs of all 3 cults into one, create a super cult. I actually don't advocate for that. Don't do that.
Absolutely not. But it's fun to think about. I feel like all of them would be down.
It could be a sitcom idea.
It could be. I would like to see a fictional version of this. That's really, really sad. And I'm just trying to think about how you pass time in a cave with families for 8 months. I can't think of much. It sounds terrible.
There was a picture that I saw of like a mattress down there.
No.
I think that's all they had. I mean,
Oh my God.
I guess they had food. They must have had food, but I don't know what it was.
Yeah, there's very little belief system that could get me in a cave for a minute, let alone
0 belief systems.
yeah. I can't think of one. I like to think there's one though. No, I'm just kidding. That's wild. That's new. That is new and so recent. And it's not the true Russian Orthodox Church, obviously, because the Russian Orthodox religion is a real religion.
They broke off of that because they said it wasn't true enough.
Got it.
Yeah, and predicted the end of the world, which never came. And again, my advice to aspiring cult leaders, don't set a date
Millennia.
that you will be alive for. Yeah.
Yeah, not even millennia. Yeah, it's got to be like far enough out that you won't be there, but not so far that people will be like, who could not say that? Like, 50 years, 100 years.
On the flip side, if it's not coming soon, what's the incentive
What's
to follow
the urgency? Yeah.
So I get it.
That's true.
Just don't join a cult or start a cult is my real advice.
That's the best way. Well, I think everybody related to my next and final story feels the same way. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it because this is not an obscure cult anymore. I think I started talking about, it's NXIVM, everybody. I know you've heard enough from me at NXIVM, but I started talking about NXIVM really in the summer of 2019 when all the federal indictments started happening, because it was mostly Albany and a lot of the people were from Brooklyn, and it just a lot of the activity in the court was in Brooklyn. So it just felt local and I was just so interested. But I remember telling people about it and then being like, wait, what? And now cut to just 2 years later and it's like we have so many podcasts and documentaries about it. So I don't know how much you know about NXIVM, Nick. So I'll tell you just a little. And then if you have questions about it, I can go off notes here. I know
you're an expert.
Yeah.
I'll just tell you real quick. I saw the documentary on HBO. That's pretty much the extent of it. And I'd listened to your podcast with the author of the book. But
Sarah Berman. She literally wrote the other book, the Don't Call It a Cult. Yeah. So you probably know quite a bit. But for anyone who doesn't know, what's really interesting, and for today's conversation, just the parallels that I see, is that it was called Executive Success Program in 1998. It's like so stodgy, so boring. Keith Raniere actually did a thing called Byline Consumer before Executive Success Program, which was a really terrible MLM that turned out to be a pyramid scheme. But it was around 2003 that they rebranded to NXIVM because it's like more mysterious and compelling, and I have to agree. But it was founded by Keith Raniere, who, spoiler alert, he's in prison. His sentence was 120 years.
Oh, I missed that. 120 years. Wow.
That's a great factoid then, because this was unprecedented. I mean, this judge really sent a message. I can't remember if he was the first or second to be, I want to say he was first. It would make sense he was the first to be sentenced. But Claire Bronfman was either first or second, and she was one of the billionaire heiresses who really bankrolled and made a lot of this possible. She got 6 years and 9 months. Nancy Salzman was just sentenced in the last few days, and she got, I didn't write it down, but I'm pretty sure she got 3.5 years. Lauren Salzman, her daughter, who basically didn't grow up in the cult because she joined at 18, but her entire adult life was in the cult, was always promised she would have a baby with Keith. He never did that for her. She's now 45. She did not get any jail time. She's got, I think, 5 years probation, but she was so cooperative with the prosecutors, and she gave so much information that they really look at her as a victim of her mom. And then Allison Mack got 3 years. I actually attended her sentencing here in Brooklyn.
Is that the actress?
Yes. So that's actress, the Smallville actress. I kind of skipped ahead. I skipped the whole middle of I'll go back, I guess. And then there's one final member who was charged criminally, and that's Kathy Russell. She doesn't come up a lot, but she's the bookkeeper. I don't expect she'll get a lot, but I think she might get something because she had to see the numbers, and all these charges mostly are racketeering, forced labor. You got to follow the money often to find the crime. But it became NXIVM, and then it was in 2015 that DOS started, which stands for Dominum Obsequious. Dominus Obsequious Sequium?
I'm not sure.
Oh, I never thought I'd forget what DOS meant. Please hold.
Well, I thought you were a true expert.
My Google tells me disk operating system. I don't think so. My Google's so pure and innocent. I'm pretty sure it's Dominus Obsequious. Maybe it's Sanctum. Oh man, I'm blanking. It translates to master over slave, and it's this inner circle for high-ranking members. And unbeknownst to the women who joined, Keith was at the top of it, planning all of it, the rituals. The women were branded. Many of them slept with Keith, and they were completely at the will of their leader, their master. And that went for the women. So Allison Mack was somebody's master. And then that woman would recruit a member and she would be their master. It was supposed to be a women's empowerment group, and it very much wasn't. I think they very much that message to make it a sex cult for Keith Raniere. And I mean, again, I'm not going to spend a ton of time on NXIVM because it is so well documented, but I thought the sentencing stuff, because that's relatively new, is good information. And I think it's a cautionary tale. I think this one caught everybody's attention once the story really broke, that this is still possible in America, for one, in very recent history. So I think it's really opened people's eyes to the vulnerability people have. And maybe us, like I always said, NXIVM is probably the one cult I don't think I'd ever have gone to DOS, but if somebody had invited me to one of these information sessions, because the NXIVM part was just self-improvement classes and how to be better in business and life. And, you had to buy books, and it was all like an MLM kind of structure, but it didn't seem harmful. And to bring it all the way back, cults have a message for everybody, but not every cult is for everyone. If you like UFOs and you were interested in space, Heaven's Gate was great for you. If you were trying to be the best version of yourself as a woman in the year 2015, NXIVM was probably going to be interesting. So, they really kind of knew their market, and they were successful in terms of size. They, at one point, early in the 2000s, they had 16,000 people signed up for their courses across the country. And They spread into Canada, and Mexico has a huge population still following NXIVM. That's a whole other conversation. That's NXIVM in the tiniest nutshell.
Very tiny nutshell there. What stands out to me most about NXIVM, well, not most, one of the things that stands out to me is that most of the people in NXIVM just thought they were working for a company, right? Yep. They're not aware of these things happening. So you don't see many cults that happen this way, where it's like a business, a company, that there's a cult within the company, right?
Hidden.
Imagine finding out your boss, like I'm talking to the listeners, imagine finding out your boss that you might see in the hallway once every week or something, because he's the CEO, and he has a sex cult within, that's what happened. So it's just
right. And think about the practical ramifications of that. It's not just I'm getting out of here. That's your paycheck. That's your livelihood. And NXIVM was such that anyone who worked for them was invested in it personally. They'd done the program. I mean, there was a lot of buy-in at that point. So it's probably a cult on that level too, but not in the way you're talking about. So yeah, it's complicated.
I have one more question for you.
Yes, please.
I don't recall from the HBO documentary that this was covered. So early on, before it gets into all the sex cult stuff, it mentions how Keith Raniere was like a piano genius.
Yeah.
And I think they might have mentioned like a super high, like almost Einstein level IQ.
Yes.
Was that all real or was that all bullshit?
It's like somewhere in the middle. So he's definitely reasonably intelligent. There's a lot said about his actual IQ test. So he said his score was something like 183.
Which is more than Einstein, I think.
Yeah, I think he said 183.
We just did a smartest man that ever lived episode.
Oh, no way.
IQ
and he
scores
wasn't on it.
No.
Yeah, so he took a version of the test that's a take home, and it's like not I don't remember the exact language around it, but it's not like the official one that you take in the presence. Like when you get into Mensa, that's like a whole process. It's the same with taking these IQ tests. They're monitored. There's a proctor. He took it home and he's self-reporting the 183. I don't think it's been verified, but I do think it was in the high range. Like I don't think he was a stupid man. And I don't think he was a musical prodigy either. He did play piano. He had a very grandiose personality, though. I think he exaggerated everything. So if it was like this, he's going to make it like this.
Yeah, which is very cult leader 101.
Oh my gosh. Ego, huge. None of the rules applied to him. That's a big one too, is there's lots of rules for other people that don't apply to you. Like the cave, right?
Yeah.
You guys all go in the cave.
The Russian cave, yes.
I don't have to, but just trust me, you do. Like that's the kind of
none of them
bullshit.
question it. Right? Like that's the level.
But his first ask would never be like, come join my cult. You got to be in this cave.
Exactly.
This is how it happens. This is fascinating.
Yeah. Should we let the listeners know now that this is a cult and that by listening to this?
Yeah. I think we're 90 minutes in. Talk about a slow burn. Like we need to tell you guys something.
We need you to sign over all your worldly possessions.
You will get a t-shirt.
I could talk cults all day. I think you could too. So this was a welcome use of 90 minutes for me.
Same here. And I do have to ask you one more question before you go, because I ask all my guests before they go, what if it was your last night? And in terms of, given the context of our doomsday conversation, it feels really dark, but I don't mean it to be dark. But if you could have one last meal tonight, what would it be?
So I thought about this question, and I think I would instruct the guards on death row. I would say I need French fries. I need steak fries. I need curly fries. I need waffle fries.
A fry buffet.
Yeah, a fry buffet. I want like every type of fry in one. French fries are my weakness. So
Me too.
Yeah.
I love French fries so much. I love a potato in almost every form, like mashed, baked. But yes, all the different fries. That's such a great answer.
Thank you.
I mean, you could have like truffle fries, parm fries.
Oh yeah, everything.
Throw a tater tot in.
Tater tots. You could do cheese fries. Yeah. So literally. I'm not great at a lot in life, but I am great at answering questions about my last meal before I die.
Nick, this was so much fun. Thank you for being on Dialogue, killing the small talk, and doing this top 10 modern cults you've probably never heard of list. It was a blast.
Yes, I agree. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Everybody check out 10ish podcast. I will link to their show in the notes, and hopefully we'll meet Brandon, the other half, next time.
Yes.
Dialogue is a Yellow Tape Media production, audio engineered by Jason Usry and produced, hosted, and edited by me, Rebecca Sebastian. If you love the podcast, please consider becoming a diehard by signing up at patreon.com/dialogue. Other ways to support the show? Follow along on social media. We are at Dialogue Pod across platforms, and you can now watch most episodes on YouTube by subscribing to my channel, Rebecca Sebastian. For more information or to drop me a note, visit RebeccaSebastian.com. Until next time, thank you for listening and killing the small talk.